Rome did something no empire had ever done before. They declared war on a woman, not on Egypt, not on an army, on me. For years they called me dangerous, manipulative, a threat to Rome itself. So they told the world a simpler story. They said I was a seductress. History has repeated their version for 2,000 years, but history rarely belongs to the defeated. My name is Cleopatra Philippata. This is how Rome turned a queen into a myth. I was not born into peace. My earliest memories are not of laughter or music, but of whispers carried through marble corridors. The palace in Alexandria glittered with gold and alabaster, yet the air inside it always felt heavy, as if the walls themselves understood how fragile power truly was. In my family, love and danger often wore the same face. Servants spoke in lowered voices, doors closed softly, eyes lingered too long. I learned very young that survival depended on understanding what was never spoken aloud. My blood was not Egyptian. It was Greek and Macedonian, the legacy of Alexander the Great and the generals who carved his empire into pieces after his death. One of those generals, Ptolemy, took Egypt for himself and founded the dynasty into which I was born. For 3 centuries, my family ruled Egypt as foreigners on an ancient throne. They spoke Greek. They lived Greek. They married their own siblings to preserve their bloodline. They ruled Egypt without becoming Egyptian. I could not rule that way. From childhood, I listened to the language of markets and temples. I watched the Nile rise and fall and understood that Egypt was not merely land to govern. It was a world to belong to. I learned the language of my people. I studied their gods, their rituals, their fears. I wanted Egypt to see me not as a foreign ruler, but as its queen. Everything I learned in that palace would be tested sooner than I expected. In my family, power was never shared. It was taken. Brothers killed brothers. Sisters betrayed sisters. Parents removed their own children when ambition demanded it. It was not cruelty for its own sake. It was survival. When my father died, I was about 18 years old. At 18, I became Queen of Egypt. I also became a target. Tradition demanded a co-ruler, and so I was forced to marry my younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. He was a child, but the men behind him were not. They saw me as a threat long before I had the chance to prove them right. Within months, I was pushed from the throne and forced into exile. The desert is a merciless teacher. The nights are cold, the days endless. The silence leaves too much room for thought. There, far from the palace, ambition sharpened into resolve. I would not disappear quietly. While I gathered allies and resources, betrayal grew in my absence. My sister Arsinoe claimed the throne for herself. Years later, when she sought sanctuary in a temple, I ordered her execution. Mercy is a beautiful ideal. Rulers rarely survive by ideals alone. Exile forced me to make the most dangerous decision of my life. I turned to Rome. Rome was unlike any power the world had ever seen. Its reach stretched across seas and continents. Its legions moved with relentless precision. At its center stood Julius Caesar. My enemies controlled every road into Alexandria. Every gate was watched, so I entered the palace as cargo, wrapped in fabric, carried through corridors by men who did not dare speak, delivered into Caesar's chambers like a shipment. When the cloth fell away, and I stood before him, I did not ask for romance, I asked for war. We spoke long into the night of empire, mathematics, astronomy, and power. He understood ambition. He understood risk. By morning, Caesar had chosen his ally. War followed. The Nile carried the bodies of those who had opposed me, and I returned to the throne of Egypt. The decision I made that night changed history forever. In time, I gave Caesar a son. I named him Caesarion. To me, he represented a future in which Egypt and Rome might stand together rather than against one another. But Rome does not share power. Rome erases it. When Caesar was assassinated, the world shifted overnight. Alliances fractured. Trust vanished. Egypt stood alone once more. The Roman who came next would change my fate even more. Mark Antony was unlike Caesar, theatrical, passionate, drawn to spectacle and emotion. When he summoned me, I knew the meeting would be a performance as much as a negotiation. I arrived on a golden barge, sails scented with perfume, music drifting across the water. Not to seduce him, to demonstrate power, because power is theater. Antony boasted often of Rome's riches. I answered with a wager. At the end of a lavish feast, I removed a pearl from my earring, crushed it into a cup, and drank it. A fortune gone in a single swallow. It was not extravagance. It was a message. Egypt was not Rome's prize. Rome was Egypt's rival. As my influence grew, Rome needed a story to explain its fear. A foreign queen, a powerful woman, a threat. They called me a witch, a temptress, a manipulator. Octavian declared war, not on Antony, on me. And this time, there would be no second chance. Our fleets met at Actium. We were defeated. Antony died. Rome marched toward Alexandria, for the first time in my life. There was no move left to make. I knew what awaited me in Rome. Chains, humiliation, a queen displayed as a trophy before cheering crowds. I refused. They say I died from the bite of a snake. Perhaps. Or perhaps I chose poison. A queen should decide how her story ends. Rome won the war. Empires rose and fell. Cities turned to dust. Generations forgot the sound of our voices. Yet fragments of our world still remain. In a museum far from the Nile, a piece of papyrus survives, worn by time, torn by centuries, covered in fading ink written by my own hand, of all the letters I wrote, of all the words that once carried my voice across kingdoms. One word endured, Basileus, ruler, sovereign. History can be rewritten, but never completely erased. If you listen carefully, the past still whispers, and sometimes it whispers only a single instruction. Make it happen.